more to this life than just what we see every day. Sheila opened with some of the celebrity deaths over the weekend, and it really drives home the point that there's more to this life than what the world has to offer. Anthony Bourdain, celebrity chef, just an incredible talent, has those of us that work in the restaurant business and have been there really understand what he has done for that environment. Died with a net worth of $16 million. Not too shabby. Kate Spade did a little better for herself. When she died, she had a net worth of $150 million. That seems like that would be enough to get rid of the problems in our life. Unfortunately, it doesn't touch the problems in our life. Unfortunately, sometimes it may even make the problems worse.
Amen.
See, there's more to this life than just what the world has to offer. There's so much more to this life than just what we can amass, what we can gather, what we can store up. And this morning, what we're going to talk about is, what is the more to this life? What is the difference that we as Christians have that the world doesn't know, doesn't experience? And why is it our goal? And why is it our role and our duty to bring them into that? Because the world doesn't have peace. The world may have $150 million in the bank account, but doesn't have peace in their life. What a shame. It is a shame. This morning I invite you to see the other side of what's really important in this life. Summertime is here. We started summer vacation a few weeks earlier this year. It's nice to get a few more weeks. I mean, although I know that school starts again a little earlier, but it feels nice to have the entire month of June and July off. And I know a few of you have already been on some vacations. Some celebrating, enjoying this summer. And I guess now that we're a couple weeks into summer, are the kids still excited that it's summertime, or are they starting to get bored yet with nothing to do? I guess the better question is, are you parents still excited that it's summertime? Are we ready to send it back? I love the commercial, the Staples commercial that they run at the end of the summer, and it's playing the Christmas song, "It's the most wonderful time of the year." And then this dad comes like wheeling through on a shopping cart, like leg up in the air, and through the aisles, and the kids are walking behind him, and they're back to school shopping, and he's like, they're going back. I remember talking to someone last year through the middle of summer, and I said, I really like having the kids home for school. It's nice to have summer break, and it means I get to sleep in a little bit more in the morning, and the kids, we don't have to do the school drop-offs and everything like that. I said, but I realized about a third of the way through the summer that they're just always there. The kids are just always there. They're hanging out. They're on my couch, they're eating my food, they're staying up late. It's like, school time, it's like, okay, it's 8:30, 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, depending on their age, it's time to get in bed. I want my television, I want my own time, and it's just weird. I just got all these teenagers just hanging out at my house all day long.
I remember that.
Yeah. All hours of the night. It seems like during the summer, too, all common sense goes out the window. Like my kids, they rationalize, well, it's summertime, so let's start a movie at midnight and eat a full meal. I mean, it's like, well, there's no, it's probably like being retired. There's just no. Wednesday night, Bishop called me. Hey, you just getting home? I said, no. I said, someone's going by to, I just saw a car pull into your driveway. I said, no, it's someone picking up Avery. She's going to a vacation Bible school. He's like, oh, are you almost home? I said, no, it's Wednesday. I'm at church. We had a church meeting. Oh, I didn't even know what day it was. I said, well.
That's not really funny.
That's because well, it is sad, but it's partially being retired. You just don't have any concept of time or day. My kids will, full meals and movies at midnight when they may have the day off in the morning, but the rest of us don't. We still have to get up. But I'm only kidding. It is really nice to have the kids around as much as they are and want to do stuff. Because the truth is, the day will come when they won't be around as much. You know, go back to the cats in the cradle, right? I mean, there's going to be a time that comes when you know, the new job's a hassle and the kids have the flu. But it's been sure nice talking to you. Life is crazy, and it moves quickly. This year has flown by. Summertime is you know, going to fly by. Kids are. My time just moves faster these days, it seems. Part of what we've been enjoying doing with Liam, since he's the movie kid, is we've been going through and rewatching old films, like classic films from the 80s and 90s and such. There's a whole new. He's got a whole new appreciation. This is a fresh canvas of somebody who can say, oh, these were movies that I loved back when I was your age, and movies that I saw in the theater. And so we've been going through and watching these old movies and different things, Goonies and movies from the 80s that we loved. And we just went through, what did we watch recently? Oh, yeah, I'm taking them through my classics, the diehards. But we watched that, but some of the other ones. But one of the movies that we watched recently that I've always loved, and was always one of my favorite 80s films, and I talk about it a lot, so you should know this, is Ferris Bueller's Day Off. I really love this movie. I love the concept of this movie. I think it's just a lot of fun. It's been 33 years now since the movie was released. But Ferris Bueller has one of the greatest quotes about life. That life moves pretty fast. And he says if you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. Now, this was Ferris Bueller's justification in skipping a class a day of high school. But his principle is correct. Maybe not the application of it, but life does move fast. And you have to pause, and you have to look around, and you have to enjoy it. Now, we have a term for this. Everybody knows this common term, right? This Latin term for seizing the day, carpe diem, right? Carpe diem, seize the day. Now, unfortunately, we live in a society where things have been dumbed down a lot. Carpe diem is a great idea, a great mentality to say that we've got to hold on to every moment. We've got to seize the day. We've got to enjoy this and grasp it. Do you know what the modern term for carpe diem has become? YOLO. You only live once. This is the new version of carpe diem. ABC said that 36.6 million tweets have included the acronym YOLO, YOLO, since it first appeared in October of 2011. And a good percentage of them involved young people doing something dangerous or risky. Yeah. Carpe diem used to mean hold on to the moment, enjoy the moment. YOLO has now been used to describe everything like, well, you know, I'm going to eat a whole box of donuts for breakfast. You only live once, right? I'm going to drive this car at 100 miles an hour because you only live once. And frequently, there have been things that have happened where people have recently used the hashtag you only live once shortly before their death. And by doing some dangerous activity. You only live once has become the mentality of some of those whose lives have been cut way shorter. And Jack Black, as I commented, made this quote, this famous quote. He just said, I'm fairly certain YOLO is just carpe diem for stupid people. But the truth is, we are only given one life to live. So a valuable question is this: how do we spend that time? How do we spend those lives? I like the concept of YOLO or carpe diem. Now, I don't want it to mean I only live once, so I'm just going to do as much bad stuff that I can in order to enjoy it. But I do like the concept of focusing on the day to day. I like the Ferris Bueller mentality that if you don't stop, and if you don't slow down, and you don't enjoy it, then you're going to miss it. Stop and smell the roses, right? How do we spend our time? You know, as we look back over this past year, we've probably all encountered some milestones, graduations, holidays, memorable events. How can we do a better job of celebrating the gift of life? I saw some interesting artist renditions, and you've seen these all over. And there's one that's grandmother's in the kitchen baking Christmas cookies, and it looks like a nice thing at the beginning, but then you look in the background and all the grandkids are sitting there, on their phones and stuff, and no one's taking the moment to enjoy these memories. And we capture them in our phones. There was another same artist did this thing. Everyone's on the beach, and it's a beautiful sunset, and everybody on the beach has their phones out and are taking pictures of the sunset. Now, in theory, that's not a bad thing. I mean, you're preserving this moment. But at the same time, you're missing the live version.
Amen.
And substituting it for a digital version.
Amen. Amen.
I guess a better question is not so much how do we spend our time, but perhaps what have we wasted our time with? Now, I'm not talking necessarily about attitude or activities, but if we look deeper, how have we wasted our opportunities to enjoy our families, to enjoy our friendships, or time with someone by allowing our attitudes to dictate the climate of that time?
Amen.
Maybe we're distracted with jealousy, deafened with anger. Perhaps we're numb with indifference or distant with selfishness. If you're like me, then more often than you would like, you allow yourself to get in the way of a perfectly good party. You end up missing the whole event. See, time is too short to be lived this way. Life goes too quick to miss out on the events that will ultimately be the most important ones. Ferris was right. We have to stop. We have to look around. And we have to look and see who's with us. And what he did that day was to take a break, from school, but to spend it with the ones that were most important to him. Long before Ferris Bueller took a day off and challenged us in our thinking of how we spend our time, I think there was an even wiser guy that lived and had some great advice on how to live a fulfilled life. Jesus of Nazareth. He talked frequently about these types of things: love, relationship, treating others with kindness, cherishing the moments together by having a right heart and a proper agenda. In fact, in our reading today, Jesus gave us one of the single most poignant statements about how we're to live when it comes to relationship. He said this, he said, if a house is divided against itself, it will not stand.
Right.
A house divided. Has anyone ever been in a relationship that summed up these words? I think we probably all have. In the darkest hour of our country during the Civil War, Abraham Lincoln quoted these words from Jesus. He said, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Certain scribes were trying to impugn Jesus' act of healing. They were disturbed at his escalating popularity. People were thronging to him, and they could see to see him everywhere he went. And he said, it is said that he can cast out demons, they said. Defensively, the scribes replied, well, no wonder he can cast out demons. He's possessed by the devil himself. Well, Jesus immediately exposed the flaw of their criticism. He said, how can Satan cast out Satan? He said, if a kingdom is divided itself, it has no power. It won't stand. If Satan were to rise up against himself, he would be divided, and therefore it would render him useless. No wonder these words captured Lincoln's imagination. Their truth is self-evident. A house divided itself cannot stand. What kind of divided houses have we encountered in our life and experienced in this life? A divided home may be a home in which people live as a family. It may be our very own family that's divided. In the Old West, there came a time when cattlemen began fencing off their ranches. Barbed wire was used to mark the boundaries. The wire let everyone know whose land was whose and whose cattle belonged to whom. The barbed wire kept cattle in, and it also kept the stranger and the rustler out. One author has suggested that every family goes through a process of putting up barbed wire. We define our boundaries as a family unit. But what happens when the barbed wire is taken down from around the lawn and moved inside and restrung down the center of the living room? A house divided. A 6th grade teacher in an upper middle class California city asked her class of 30 to complete a creative writing assignment by finishing a sentence that began with the words, I wish. The teacher the teacher expected the children to respond with wishes for things like bicycles, dogs, television sets, a trip to Hawaii, a puppy, a little baby brother. But she couldn't have been more wrong. 20 of the 30 children made references in their responses to their own disintegrating families. Here's a few examples. She said students wrote things like, I wish my parents wouldn't fight, and I wish my father would come back. Another said, I wish my mother didn't have a boyfriend. A third said, I wish I could get straight A's so my father would love me. Another said, I wish I had one mom and one dad so the kids wouldn't make fun of me. I have 3 moms and 3 dads, and they botch up my life. Another said, I wish I had an M1 rifle so I could shoot those who make fun of me. A house divided against itself. What damage do we do? A 9-year-old girl once said, I don't know exactly what a family is, but I do know one thing. Your friends can go off and they say they don't want to be your friends anymore, but people just can't go off and say they don't want to be your family anymore. And I wish that was true, don't you? See, nothing on earth is sadder than when a family is divided against itself.
Amen.
Now, that is not to say that any home can be free of conflict or controversy. We know it's impossible. You take numerous different people of numerous different mindsets and you put them in an environment and together, and there's going to be problems. It's inevitable. You can't get away from that. Authentic human beings living together, there will be honest disagreement. It's natural. In fact, it's kind of healthy. The Bible talks about it. It's iron sharpens iron. When there's conflict, when there's difficulty, the end result is that both people become more usable, become better in the process. As a French philosopher once said, it is better to debate a question without settling it than to settle it without debate. David Osberg, in his book, Caring Enough to Confront, suggests there are 5 possible steps to solving disagreements. He said the first one is, I win, you lose. He said that game is played everywhere. And obviously it's destructive to a relationship. The second is, you win, I quit. And most of us have seen these kind of games played too. The third one he calls is the doormat. One person decides, well, walk on me, step on me, I just want peace at all costs. I don't care about the substance of the issue, but at least we have peace in our home. Certainly we've maybe recognized any kind of relationships that are like this. Perhaps the most obvious example of the doormat was Gene Stapleton's character Edith Bunker in All in the Family.
Amen.
One scene, Edith was talking to her friend Amelia, and the dialogue went like this. Amelia said, of all the people I know, you're practically the only one who has a happy marriage. Edith says, really? Me and Archie? Well, thank you. Amelia says, what is your secret, Edith? Edith says, oh, I ain't got a secret. Archie and me still have our fights. Of course, we don't let them go on too long. Somebody always says, I'm sorry. And Archie always says, it's okay, Edith. I don't care how much you love your family. God did not create you to be a doormat. Osberg says there are 2 other possible steps. One of these is, I'll meet you halfway, which is really fine if there is both wrongs on both sides. But he says the other is caring enough to confront. Sometimes confrontation is necessary in any relationship. But what is most important is that we confront with the understanding that regardless of our difference, we will keep the barbed wire strung on the outside of our house and not down the center of our living room. Because a house divided itself against itself cannot stand. And this is so important in our families and in our homes, isn't it? But I want to tell you something today. This is so important within our church family as well. See, a church must be different than the world. Just like we were talking about this morning. We know what the result of the world's goals and aspirations are. We see the end result of how many people that have everything. The church has to be different. We have to be different. It can't work otherwise. There was a photocopied sign posted inside a church office taped to the wall behind the secretary's desk. And it read, you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. Now it makes sense, right? Churches are busy. They're hectic places, confusing places. There's a lot of worship services to plan, educational programs to run, choirs to rehearse, fellowship dinners to organize, outreaches to facilitate. There's a lot going on. The running joke in a lot of churches and ministers that have been in churches for years understand this, that the kind of joke is, well, next week it'll be easier. Next week it'll be quieter. Next week it won't be so hectic. The truth is, next week never comes. And I think we can relate with that in all of our lives, in whatever job we're doing. But I think on a deeper level, it was important to have that sign hanging in the church office that you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. I could say to us, you don't have to be crazy to come here, but it sure helps. See, there's something strange about the church. We're not just another civic organization or club. The church's view of reality is increasingly out of phase from a lot of prevailing viewpoints.
Amen.
In the church, we say and do things that don't make sense to people outside this house.
Amen.
Here we are, gathered on the weekend, sitting on church chairs instead of lawn chairs. People we know are outside, working on their tans, washing their cars, but we're here, given here each and every week, inside to lift our voices in prayer and song. A lot of other people are planning a barbecue or sipping a Bloody Mary this morning. But we come together to break bread and drink the cup of Christ. Now, to the outsiders, it might seem crazy. Well, the truth is a little bit crazy. Especially when the church starts to act like the rest of the world. Attitudes of selfishness, backbiting, gossip. These have no place in our church family. We who are sitting in this place this morning have experienced the love of God and the power of His resurrection. And we know that we cannot do life on our own. See, that's exactly what Paul talks about in 1 Corinthians. He says this, he says, for the word of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing. But to us who are being saved, it's what? It's the power of God. For it is written, I will destroy the wisdom of the wise, and the cleverness of the clever I will set aside. The way of the world is destruction, but the way of God is hope and peace and life. Why do we envy what others have so much? See, it's crazy to sit here week after week. Perhaps a waste of time. You could be on a boat right now. You could be mowing your yard, watching pregame come September. It's crazy. Or is it? No, wait. It's the power of God. And I wouldn't want to be anywhere else on Sunday morning. See, that's why when a church house is divided, we lose that power. We become just like the rest of the world, where there is no power to change lives. There is no power to give hope. There is no power to move in the hearts and lives of the world. The world laughs when we sing, they'll know we are Christians by our love, and then explode into controversy within our own ranks. You know, it always makes the front page. The newspaper loves to see church scandal. It's really, really juicy and tasty news. Because they're watching. They're always watching to see those that claim to live differently act, just like the rest of the world. I mean, if no one complained during the hurricane that other buildings were not open for refugees. But when Joel Osteen did not open his building, it became big news.
Yeah.
Now, should he have done it? Absolutely. But was he the only one that had a big building that should have opened it for refugees? No, of course not. But the truth is, you say you live this way, but you don't act this way. What gives? The Los Angeles Times one morning, to millions of subscribers, got the headline that said 300 members splinter from the church. And underneath was a full 3-column story about a fight that had broken out in some prominent Southern California ministry. On the same paper, on the same day, another lead article accompanied by a large picture told the story of another church doing battle with the state over its tax status. See, people are watching. It's not fair. You're right. You claim to be a Christian, and they have all these expectations on you. Oh, yeah, I see you go to church, but, you do this and you do this. Yeah, it's not fair. We're not doing anything different than they're doing most of the time. But they have a higher expectation. See, we're the ones to claim to know from the one from whom peace and love flow. And when we act differently than Jesus, the world says, see, I knew it. I knew it. They're not any different than us. They think just like we do. And that's not a mark against them. They're very happy in their situation. But they expect us to be different. we are called to a higher standard. Sorry, that's the way it is. The bottom line is this: the cause of Christ is hurt when Christians misrepresent Jesus' values. You go to the store, we had this great discussion in our one of our devotions this week, and someone gives you too much change back. What do? Well, I mean, I think that all of us would say, of course we would correct their mistake, even if it was, a massive blessing in our favor. We just are held to a different standard. I know people that would not do that. They would be excited that they got away with something. That can't be our mindset. We must be above reproach. We are called to a higher standard. Dr. Eugene Bryce tells a delightful but disturbing story about a minister who had returned to visit a church he had once served. He ran into Bill, who had been an elder and a leader in the church, and he wasn't around anymore. The pastor said, "Bill, what happened? I used to see you here every time the church doors open." Well, pastor said, "Bill, a difference of opinion arose in the church. Some of us couldn't accept the final decision, so we started a church of our own." "Oh, is that where you worship now?" asked the pastor. "Well, no," answered Bill. "We found that there too people were not faithful, and a small group of us began meeting in a rented hall at night." "Well, has that proven satisfactory?" asked the minister. "No, unfortunately, I cannot say that it has," Bill responded. "Satan was very active in that fellowship. So my wife and I withdrew and began to worship on Sunday in our homes by ourselves." "Well, then at last you have found inner peace?" asked the pastor. He said, "No, I'm afraid we haven't," Bill responded. "Even my wife began to develop ideas that I'm not comfortable with. So now she worships in the northeast corner of the living room and I'm in the southwest." A house divided against itself. Somewhere I read a true story about a chairman of a certain church committee who stood one Sunday morning before the congregation to present a minor matter of church business for a vote. After the vote, his next agenda on the item was to lead a congregation in the singing of some hymns. He confidently presented his project for a vote, fully expecting routine acceptance by the congregation, but to his surprise, the matter failed to win congregational approval. And he was so completely rattled by this surprising turn of events that introducing the next hymn, instead of inviting the group to join him in singing "I Stand All Amazed," he accidentally introduced it as "I Stand All Opposed." Honest slip of the tongue, but I know how he was feeling. That day he felt that everyone in the church had opposed him personally. And that happens in families. We will disagree. But heaven help the church that gets out the barbed wire and starts running it down the center aisle.
Amen.
Because the house divided itself against itself will not stand. Jesus is the only answer in healing a divided house.
That's right.
In Him, there is healing for divided families, divided churches, and divided lives. An interesting study has been done recently underscoring the necessity of a central unifying factor in our lives. A scientist at UCLA has studied several rare groups of people that were cut off from society, left to isolation. And he analyzed these groups that survived and the groups that didn't, and found that the vital factor for survival was a central unifying principle. Without this rallying point, the groups perished. So these rare groups that he found that were cut off, if they had a common goal, they could live together. What's the classic novel about isolation that we all had to read in probably high school? The Lord of the Flies.
Yeah.
What happens in The Lord of the Flies? There's these kids that are good Catholic school kids. They're uniformed, something. They get lost and they just spin out of control. They end up killing each other. They end up fighting. They end up doing all these things because there was no unifying factor, unifying principle. Among the survivors of the group was Japanese soldiers who hid in the jungles of Guam and other Pacific islands for nearly 30 years after World War II. For a third of a century, they posted sentries, patiently mending their clothing, lit bonfires for Japanese ships that never came. 30 years. Their unifying purpose was winning the war, and rallying behind it, they achieved unity. 30 years. Another less well-known group that survived was the Yahi Indians of California. Only 16 members of their tribe survived the massacre in 1870, and they hid in a remote canyon for 41 years, motivated by the terrible fear of being lynched. Now, it wasn't perhaps the greatest of motivations, but it kept them together, and it kept their survival, and it continued their legacy. Anybody think of a group that did not do well? Perhaps one of the best examples of that was the crew of the HMS Bounty.
Oh, yeah.
Mutinied in 1789. They had spent 3 peaceful months on the island of Tahiti. The crew didn't want to leave, but the captain had other plans. It's time to get on. I mean, Tahiti's beautiful, but we got to keep moving. So they got on the boat. They started to sail away. The crew decided that they didn't want to leave Tahiti, so they mutinied. They set the captain and the officers afloat in a raft. They went back to Tahiti. In their boat, they grabbed a group of Tahitian men and women and sailed off to live in a deserted island. It sounds like paradise, right? And when an American whaling vessel found their crew and their friends 18 years later, only one of the original crew was left. Friction and fighting for the women had quickly led to murder and suicide. They had no purpose to rally around other than their self-serving lusts. So it is with our lives. Many of us live fragmented lives, tossed and buffeted by conflicting desires. We need to unite our lives around one love, one Savior, one Lord. Because a house divided against itself cannot stand. It's true. No house is big enough for cohabitation by the Spirit of Christ and by a spirit of malice, envy, hatred, and hostility. I remember when talking to someone a few years back that said that God spoke to them and said that God really wanted to shake up the church. And my answer to that is good. Absolutely. Come and shake away, Lord. In fact, start with me. Shake away every negative attitude and every response that I'm too quick to give. Shake away feelings of hurt, anger. Shake away selfish desires. Shake out laziness and doubt. I accept that. In fact, I want God to shake us all up. It's time that we as a church make a stand for what is right. We need to take a stand for our families and for our relationships. Take a stand that we won't waste another day being focused on ourselves and how many likes we can get on that new selfie we posted. See, what is truly important? Ask Anthony Bourdain. Ask Kate Spade, what is truly important today? It's not all the stuff that you have, but it's each other. It's the relationship. See, this is the life that we are called to, and the life that Jesus has walked before us. It's the power of God demonstrated each and every day by those who get it. You see, when we live as if God's reign has already come, then we find ourselves in a strange new family called church. People of all kinds of walks of life together with a common goal, to worship Jesus. In our time, perhaps no one has seen the true social dimension of God's kingdom more clearly than Martin Luther King Jr. MLK confronted the evil house of racism with a clear word of gospel justice. His work provoked allegations against his character and threats against his life, and yet he remained faithful to that vision until the day that someone shot him. The key, he said in a number of his speeches, was a certain maladjustment. This is what he said. He said, there are certain things within our social order which I am proud to be maladjusted, and to which I call upon all people of goodwill to be maladjusted to as well. If you allow the preacher in me to come out now, he said, let me say to you that I never did intend to adjust to the evils of segregation and discrimination. I never did intend to adjust myself to religious bigotry. I never did intend to adjust myself to economic conditions that will take necessities from the many and give luxuries to the few. I never did intend to adjust myself to the madness of materialism, to the self-defeating effects of physical violence. And he says, and I call upon all good people of goodwill to be maladjusted, because it may be that the salvation of the world lies in the hands of the maladjusted. And he concluded, he said, so let us be as maladjusted as Jesus of Nazareth, who could look into the eyes of the men and women of his generation and cry out, love your enemies. Bless them that curse you. Pray for them that hate you. So let me ask you, has the world changed? Every one of us must decide, just as Dr. King made his decision. Who are we going to be? Will we follow the promptings of Jesus, even if it makes us uncomfortable? I'll tell you a guy about a minister by the name of Bill. Bill was just someone who was accused of being just a little bit crazy in his service for Jesus. In fact, Bill had a ministry. One of his ministries was he would hold workshops at churches teaching them how to clown. He was a clown. And not long ago, he was in a distant city, and he was packing up after a workshop. And the phone at the church rang. No one was around, so Bill answered it. The voice said, "Are you a minister?" And he said, "Well, yes, actually I am." He said, "Come quickly," said the voice. "Our child is dying of leukemia." Bill dropped everything. He ran out to his rental car and he drove to the hospital. He never stopped to think to himself, why did I answer the phone at someone else's church? I could be on my way home right now instead of in this situation. But see, that even wasn't the worst part about this. You see, as Bill arrived at the hospital and he ran up the steps and through the double doors and down the hospital, he caught a glimpse of himself in one of the pictures on the wall, and to his surprise, he was still dressed as a clown. White face, red nose, orange hair, green suspenders. He didn't even have time to change because of the emergency. He didn't even think about it. So he kept going. He found the room, knocked on the door, and entered the room where a young girl in a hospital bed lay surrounded by her family. The father was upset. He said, "We called for a minister, not a clown." But the child saw him and replied, "He's better than a minister. Can he stay?" No one dared to deny the request. Bill sat at the edge of the hospital bed. He sang songs to her. He told her Bible stories. He cradled the little girl in his arms until the end. When the last moment came, she made a final request, said, "Would you do my funeral?" Well, that's how it happened. On the third day, crazy Bill stood with a white face, red nose, orange hair, and green suspenders, and not speaking a word, he led all the people in a service as they laughed, cried, and remembered the little girl's face, her life. A few people present thought it was wrong to have a clown at a funeral, much less leading the service. They murmured afterwards, "That minister is out of his mind. He's crazy." And by all the proper canons of the pastoral protocol, they're right. You don't send a clown to do a pastor's work. But there he stood, acting as if God's joyful power had already defeated death. Was he crazy? Well, who can say? All that we know is that day Bill heard Jesus say, "I am the resurrection and the life," and he acted accordingly.
Amen.
Amen.
You see, you don't have to be crazy to work here. You don't have to be crazy to go here. But it certainly helps. Likewise, you don't have to be out of your mind to do the work of Jesus Christ, even though a faithful life can provoke the world to think of you in that way. Should evil conspire against you? Should you be in the line of fire of the enemy? Should you have people talk about you, throw you under the bus? Don't return the favor. Walk away. Stay righteous. And listen closely. I'm sure you'll hear Jesus say things like, "You're my brother. You're my sister. You're my family." Amen.
Amen.